In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Hi, welcome to Materialise, the Launch Tabletop podcast, where we talk about turning game ideas into tangible objects. Today is the 18th of May, 2023, and this is our 24th episode. This week's topic is art direction for tabletop games with Dan May. Well, I think that might be a milestone in Materialise history where I think I did the intro bit without an error. So I guess I'll have to listen back later on and find out if I got it totally right or if I missed something. But I feel like I did all right, yeah. I nearly was going to pat myself on the back during it. And I was like, no, wait, get it over and done with. And then you can do it. So hi, yeah, I'm your host, Eris, and I'm joined by Alana. Hello, Alana.
Hello.
How you
doing?
See
you again. Yep,
yeah.
I'm good. 100% virus free.
That's positive because I know your household is experiencing not that.
Yeah. The household is positive. I'm very much negative. So.
The world we live in. And we're also joined by Kate, who's having some technical problems. So I don't know if they're resolved yet or not. Are they? Hey, Kate.
I have a mouse that's out of the box now, so I'm going to go and try plugging it in.
So Kate might disappear for a second while she's figuring out
any degree of success.
But you've tried, what, 3 or 4 mice, and they're just not working for you?
Something, yeah. Anyway, I've just got, my husband just walked in with 4 new ones from the shops, which is because we've got JB just across the road.
Yeah.
You called technical support and their advice was plug it in.
Yeah, that's right. Unplug it, turn it off, turn it on, yeah.
There's 3 of them and number 4. And secretly, I'm hoping that number 4 is the only one that works because it looks much sexier.
Oh, it's the nicer one, yeah.
We'll find out. So anyway, I'm going to disappear and I'll be back.
All right, you'll disappear and then we'll do that. And then we'll introduce our special guest, Dan. Hi, Dan.
Hey, it's good to see you again.
So you've been on the show before. You're in the notes, I've put you as a special recurring guest because you're one of the, I think you're our second person who's been on twice now. We had Aaron on as well a couple of times. So yeah, you're now a recurring guest. And so anyone who's interested in meeting Dan and Brenna, go back to, I don't remember, was it episode 13 or something we said? Something like that. I think they were on. I think something we looked it up last week.
Yeah, we did look it up. I think it was 13.
I didn't prepare very well and have it ready for now. So I'll just do my little intro spiel, Dan, and you can then see if I get it right. So Dan May is 1/3 of Quillsilver Studio and has done game development and art direction and graphic design, or the art itself, for a number of games, including Everdell, Dog Park, Trekking Through History, Black Orchestra, and more. And Quillsilver, I didn't put in my notes when I was doing this from memory. Quillsilver, you're sort of like a multi-discipline studio where you can help game makers, kind of tackle pretty much every aspect of the production cycle. Is that sort of right?
Yeah, we're a creative studio, mostly creative and marketing. So between the 3 of us and some subcontractors, pretty much everything from game design and development through to Kickstarters and that type of thing.
Wonderful. Yeah, cool. And so Launch Tabletop has partnered with Quillsilver on an upcoming Kickstarter campaign for our Stellar Prince. Alana, are you able to share? Because I was going to get Kate to do it, but Kate's currently not here. So Alana, are you able to? Do you have anything there to talk? Can you do a quick, 2-minute spiel about what the Stellar Print Kickstarter is and what's happening?
Kate's definitely the better salesperson, but I'll give it a crack. So we have. Many of the viewers know by now we've been concocting what we call stellar prints, and they are metal art prints of board game art, and also artists that are involved in board gaming in some fashion, either artists for board games or whatnot. We've partnered with various publishers and artists to produce these prints, and we're dropping a Kickstarter very soon. Very excited about. We've been working on this for a very long time. Engaged with 3 prominent artists in the board game field to produce original works of art, which we'll be making available through the Kickstarter campaign. Kate, who's disappeared, has them in her hot hands. She can actually show them when she's coming.
How about we do
back.
that? We'll do that at the end of the episode. Then we'll. Oh no, here Kate's back. Can you just show us maybe one of the prints just to give us an idea about what they sort of look like?
Let me just move all the mice I put on top of them. But I have a mouse that works now. The reason it took me like 30 seconds to disappear was because I couldn't make the mouse work to turn off my camera.
Oh, hang on, technology. Now I'm the one struggling with technology. Here we go.
I thought it was just me who was a bit challenged today, Eris, but no.
No, it's also me. I thought there was a shortcut in the app to have the change who was on the big screen, but nope, there wasn't.
All right.
Or if there was, I didn't know it.
Here's Andrew Bosley's first piece. So this is the first in his series.
So each of the artists we have like 3 pieces from. That's correct, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. A set of 3 from each artist.
Beautiful. So we won't dwell too much on it right now. We'll come back and do a bit more of an in-depth explanation at the end of the episode. But I just wanted to raise it now because obviously one of the reasons that we've got Dan on is that Dan did the art direction for these pieces. So you were heavily involved in it, Dan.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's Miguel's first piece.
Miguel who? Sorry.
Miguel Coimbra.
Coimbra. So we have Andrew Bosley, Miguel Coimbra,
and Jackie Davis.
And they're all
see the nice little red metallic glints in Jackie's.
Oh yeah, like a little reflection there. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll talk about that a bit more in detail later on. Okay, so we might move into the main interview section of the show and get to it right away. This is probably our quickest move to the main interview I think we've ever done in an episode. I'm trying to be a bit more, directed and focused this time, so we'll see how we go. So Dan, you've been helping with like game development, art direction, graphic design, the actual doing art itself for like a long time for games. I don't actually know roughly how long you've been doing it. Do you know roughly how long you've been doing it?
Board games probably 10 to 12 years, somewhere in there.
Yep.
I suppose. 2011.
Yeah, fantastic.
Lost in the sands of time.
Yeah. But no, that's great. And you have done so much. Like a friend or someone else shared a game that another person I know, Alex Winter, had designed, and I was reading the Board Game Geek page and it said art by Dan May, and I'm like, what? And I was like, I already thought it was beautiful, and then I was like, oh, I know Dan, this is amazing. So like, you've done the artwork itself for stuff, but like one thing that you have done a lot of, at least for the projects that some of the projects I've seen like Everdell and other ones, is the art direction. And so that's sort of the main focus that we're going to be talking about today, is what does that mean, and what can maybe people who are needing to hire artists, what can they maybe some tips and stuff that they can use. So I guess, are you able to give us a definition for our listeners about what is art direction?
Okay, well, it can be different for different industries, so art direction for a magazine or art direction on film, or they're different. They will vary. So speaking specifically for board games, there's a few things that the art director's role kind of encompasses. So the very basic stuff is, finding an artist, managing an artist, helping artists, communicating the brief, helping inspire artists, that sort of thing. But then depending on the position you're in, so if you're in the position of a company or you're working for a particular company, then an art director may be the person that is thinking about the sort of the company vision. So, if you're working for Fantasy Flight as the art director, you have a certain sort of direction of where you want to sort of push the look of the games, how you want things to sort of hold together. Something that individual artists aren't necessarily going to be abreast of. They're not going to really see that bigger picture. So an art director may be in that position to be thinking more about long-term. Art directors more likely to be more aware of the game, and at least be, definitely artists will be involved, and they'll probably want to play the game. But I think when it comes to sort of being able to communicate that to artists, sometimes artists aren't gamers themselves. So being able to sort of interface with the artist on that level and sort of communicate with them, I think an art director can be more in touch with the market, the broad market of games that are out there, and so therefore help make decisions for the product that are sort of in context with other products.
Yep.
So again, an artist may come in, they're focused on what they need to do. An art director may be thinking, well, there's another game that has this art style that's very similar. Where do we position ourselves in the broader market? Another thing an art director will do is many projects have multiple artists. So that's where an art director could be very useful. If you've got a bigger project and there's 2 or 3 artists, or I've worked on projects with 10 artists, and when it gets to that point, being an art director, or if someone's like for Magic the Gathering sets or something, where they're working with 20, 30, 40 artists a set potentially. Being able to art direct that, give instructions that are cohesive, that are going to lead to art that works together, and set sort of certain ideas for it. Also, just the graphic designer, working to blend the graphic design with the art can be something the art director does. Sometimes the graphic designer will take that role. Like, as you know, like there's plenty of board games that get created that don't have an art director. Just by way
or
of
the art director is the publisher.
Sort of fulfills that role. But as an art director, the way you can sort of extend that role is through practically helping the artist. So, I'll often work up compositions. Being an artist myself, I'll be able to help them problem solve things more quickly. Be able to speak the sort of the language of art a little bit more. And dream up concepts. So, a lot of art is visual, but obviously there's a whole layer to it as to why you're illustrating what you are and what you're trying to communicate. And so you can work with artists on that and help guide them. And
so it covers a lot of stuff, doesn't it? Yeah. So what would you say is the biggest difference between art and graphic design then, like just to help establish maybe what that difference is for listeners?
Okay. Well, I've always said, the more I've worked in board games, the more I believe it is that in board games especially, I think that there is a blur between those two things. I think, graphic communication, when you think about it, you're trying to communicate something to the person using the thing, right? And I think that in board games, I think the art can serve that role, where it's communicating an idea or communicating a game concept. So I do think that there's a blurry line between graphic design and art, especially when you get into like illustrated icons. And I think the line's blurred. If you wanted to sort of, if you were going to draw a line, generally it's between the graphic design is specifically there to facilitate the gameplay, and the art is there to facilitate the theme potentially. They blend together, but if you needed to draw a line, I would say that's probably where it is. You could play the game without the art. Essentially, you couldn't play it without the graphic design. It's kind of the line.
Alana, do you have a question for Dan?
Yeah. Do you find that art direction necessarily encompasses graphic design? Or are they generally separate things?
For me, it does. I think projects very, very much vary. And I think that's because everyone's sort of doing it their own way and publishers are doing it their own way. But for me, I think art direction sort of sits on top of graphic design and art from my perspective, in that, you sort of, at least in terms of board games, the goal of creating a good board game with a good visual presentation is that it sort of it enhances the gameplay, right? So that's kind of what you're trying to do with the art direction in a game. And so therefore, that can sort of like think about, okay, this is the sort of way we want to use the graphic design. This is the way we want to use the art. This is the way they're going to complement each other. I sort of see it like that it's an overarching sort of position on top of graphic design, if that answers your question.
Yeah,
it all has to be cohesive.
Yeah, you glue the creatives like together. You're the glue, the conduit between creatives and the end product.
The wrangler,
the business.
And I think art direction can kind of span into product design and things like that as well. Like, Think about the sort of components we're going to use and things like that. Like I say, this is a title that's not really applied. You know, there's definitely big companies that have art directors, you know, but it's not a role that's applied a lot. Board games,
Yeah,
like I don't think
so following that,
the BGG or whatever, it's like it
Yeah.
exists. The role exists, but it's normally kind of somewhere between multiple people. You know?
Yeah.
And I think what you touched on before is true, that like in the vast majority of board game companies, it's someone who's doing art direction on top of other roles, whether they're the publisher or whether they're another function in the business. And so I guess we might as well maybe look at it from that direction and think about the people who are having to do it amongst other things, or pick up some skills. Let me just pick a question from one that I've already written down, because I wrote one that I liked and now I can't find it. Of course I can't.
Well, I've got one.
Okay, you go. Far away.
What makes a good art director? If you had to go out and find someone, what are the qualities that you're looking for?
Wow. There's a lot to it, I think, surprisingly. I think it's in the subtleties, like you could definitely get away without using an art director, but it's in the subtleties and it's probably the breadth of knowledge. I think having a good general knowledge of lots of different art styles, understanding games well, understanding what the medium is and how it can be effective, understanding sort of, like how much things cost and, those types of things. So it's tricky to sort of say, just to pinpoint it down. I mean, for me personally, I think being able to identify what's good about a piece of art and what's potentially not is good. I think, ultimately the artists that you work with are going to make a really big difference to the game in terms of the final pieces. That's their job to deliver on that final piece. When it comes to the ideas and the concepts and that side of things, that an art director can really give you an edge there, because they're able to sort of imagine the art essentially, or sort of envision where it can go and what's going to sort of hit. So yeah, it's very difficult, I think, for me to say exactly what you would look for, because I think it's something that it's much more about being able to sort of work with what you've got, like get the most out of what you've got. So when I first started out, we did a lot of projects with very low budget. So at that point, being a good art director was being able to identify talent, and people, and ways to sort of stretch budgets and ways to make things look good without a huge budget. And the other end of the spectrum, it can be, if it was something like working for Magic the Gathering or something, which has like quite a lot of art and quite a lot of budget, then the art direction is really about world building, maximizing the content and the depth of what happens underneath the surface of these pieces, so they're cohesive, and so there's this consistency and this life to it that comes across. So just generally, it's generally sort of a creative kind of position, I guess. People that are good with world building, good with conceptualizing things. And I think that's just having a broad interest in
being able to see a few steps ahead.
Yeah, because the other side of it as well is that you can pick an individual artist, right? So you could say Andy Bosley, look at his work and be able to say, oh, look, I think he's going to be able to do these forest scenes and these critters really well. And Andy's an artist that does a lot of things well, but he still has a kind of a range that he's really, really good at. This is the sort of stuff he's really good at. Whereas with an art director, what you need to be able to sort of like, especially like what we do, where we get a lot of clients coming through and they're all very different, different tastes and different ideas of where they want their products to go. Being able to sort of have that broader sense of things and being able to sort of make decisions about the artwork, that's then you can choose the right artist for that project. I think that sort of thing makes for a good flexible sort of art director. Kind of steer if they sort of have a more limited kind of taste range, then maybe that's fine for a very specific narrow band of stuff. But that's most of the things I've worked on have been fairly broad. So that's kind of where an art director comes in handy. You know, if you have a very specific taste as a small publisher and you know what you want and you want all your games to look kind of similar, then, you know, that's a different, then you just hire a few artists that you really love. You know, like leader games, you know, have really nice art, but it's like, okay, the one artist pretty much do most of this stuff. Looks really good. But less likely to necessarily need an art director in that sense. They kind of know what they're doing.
So thinking about that, what could someone who, like a company who's not hiring an art director, they're a small publisher, maybe just a couple of people, if they're hiring an artist, what would be some? Is there any tips about art direction that they can take on when they're to work with artists? So, are there any kind of little tips for art directing an artist, especially when you're new to it?
When you're new to it, look, I mean, you want to be able to lean on the artist as much as you can. So you definitely want to be able to find the right artist to begin with. And, you know, I'm sure you've heard other people say that generally about finding artists, that you want to find the right person. Definitely don't want to be fighting against their style too much.
Well, let's talk about that then. Let's just drill down on that. Is there how do you find a good artist? Like, how do you find or maybe not a good artist, because there's a lot of good artists, but like, how do you find the right one for your project? Like, is there a method that you use or some kind of general process that you've found that works for you?
No, I just kind of use serendipity, I think. That's
okay.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, sometimes it does feel like that. Like, things just go, I don't know, things come up. Like, obviously, the main way that people find them is that they'll look at other existing projects that they like, especially board game projects, and they'll say, I like that game. I want it to look like that. That's probably the simplest way to do it.
Yep.
I've tended to be more in a situation where I've, you know, kind of either sort of just found artists along the way, like just had my eye out all the time, you know, just looking for things. And if I see something, you know, I'll follow them and it just sort of percolates up that where you sort of, you know, the right game comes along and you sort of think, oh yeah, that person would be really good for it. And so I think it's just keeping an eye out, you know, there's Twitter, Instagram, and, you know, some of the other sites that have sort of actually kind of gone a little bit more quiet since the whole AI thing. Some artists have left some sites, but, you know, like you can, you know, there's generally sort of those art sites. You can hunt people down through those. As far as the specifics of choosing someone, some of it's going to come down to kind of your expectations around it. So one big expectation, especially with like finding a new artist, is, and in general, like if you set the expectations for like time really, really short with artists, that I think can generally lead you to problems. Like if I'm just thinking now about like a first-time publisher trying to self-publish, if there's anything, like most artists, if you see their work and you really like it, then they may be able to do that for you, and most chances they'll be able to do it for you. The thing that's generally sort of where things go a little bit wrong is things take longer than expected. So a piece of general advice would just be, you know, be very sort of conservative with how you set your sort of timelines and your deadlines. So when you sort of get in touch with artists, I sort of tend to get in touch with artists pretty early and just, you know, just take the time to get the work right and be happy to work with someone that's, you know, if someone's committed to doing a good job, then just give them a little bit of extra time to do it generally. Because artists, the irony is that the best artists tend to be very busy because they've got a lot of work on, and you can only do so much work and they get booked out ahead of time. And the up and coming artists tend not to be able to be full time, so they've probably got a full time or a part time job. And they're doing stuff on the side. So you're sort of, you know, a few artists that have just got enough to be able to be like, they're only booked out a month, but kind of aware. So I think being aware of, you know, like the amount of time that the work will take, and working with an artist in that sort of way is another thing that kind of an art director can kind of get a sense of, you know, like how much time they're able to put into it.
Yeah. So when you're hiring or when you're like maybe exploring it with an artist, one thing that I've heard, I think we had oh boy, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten his name. He's a friend of mine. Holy moly, from Platypus Games, Platypus Industries. Matthew Aslan. Oh boy, I'm sorry, Matthew. If you see this, I'm hanging my head in shame. Completely blanked on your name. I could picture your face, picture your games. But one thing Matthew, I think, mentioned was that he will sometimes, when he's trying to find an artist, will ask them, like when he's seeing sample work of theirs, he'll actually say like, how long did this piece take for you to create, just to kind of get a sense of, okay, that's a 20-hour piece, or that might be a 150-hour piece, like, like it's just or whatever, and is that something that you have done as well, as like tried to like actually directly ask the artist, like, how long things take, just to get a measure of sort of what to expect? Or is that not, have you even tried that before?
Yeah, I mean, that tends to be part of the conversation, when you first meet with an artist. You've got, are you excited about this project? Can you, what's your sort of schedule? Can you do this project? This is roughly how big it is. How much time have you got? And then sort of what the budget is for it. You always want to sort of have those three things kind of in place, and before you even sort of get to the next step of briefing them, for sure.
So talking about the budget, how does someone like determine the budget for hiring an artist? Like, is there some way that a company can, or a person who's like self-publishing or working on this, that they can kind of, I don't know, some kind of guide that they can use for what it might cost?
A magic equation.
Yeah, I know it probably doesn't exist, because it's like, how long's a piece of string? But like I think, let's look at something like, when you're putting together your costs for your game, you might get quotes on the printing and the manufacturing, and so you'll know, okay, it's going to cost me roughly X dollars to get this thing printed and shipped to a warehouse, and that will then help you to figure out what your price is going to be when you sell the game. How does the art kind of fit into that? Is that something that you kind of also think about in terms of the cost of the the final product of the game, or is it sort of a bit different from those kind of other, printing and things like that?
Yeah, it's a little, it's related to it. I think there's two parts to it. One is, how much art do you have in the game? And then two is, how much does that art cost, individually? So you can imagine an equation where it's, okay, we're going to have 10 pieces of art in this game, and they're all going to be incredible, and it's going to be $1,000 each or whatever. Or we could have 30, and they're going to be $250 each, whatever. And it could be the same game. So decisions around where you sort of put your art budget in a project is sort of part of the equation. And that's another thing an art director can do and help with, is just sort of being able to sort of look at the game and say, look, do we really need art on all these cards, or will we be better off putting them on these player boards? They're going to be on display most of the game. These are going to be face down. Whatever, there's different decisions that come into it as far as where you're going to put your budget. And I think those sliders can go both ways. So we have plenty of clients that come to us and they say, these are all the components, and this is all the art that we want on all these different components. And then they'll say, I'll say also, roughly, what's your budget for art? Is it, and we can come at it different ways, but that may be the way we come at it. And they might say, $10,000 to $15,000 or something like that. And then we can look at it and we can go, okay, well, you're not going to be able to do that for that, but this is that. And maybe if we, what sort of art and what sort of style of art do we want? So you're sort of constantly sort of pushing back and forth between, the artist's cost, the amount of art that you want in the game, and just trying to sort of, balance that so that you get the kind of the best result, the best bang for your buck, basically from the presentation of the game. That's sort of the art of it. Like every game's kind of different, so there's no real that's the algorithm, but what figures you plug into that, there's going to be a lot of motivations for that, right? Like,
how often do you get a complete mismatch between what the publisher thinks is adequate, I guess, as a budget for art and what the actual reality is? For if that's what you want, you're totally nowhere near the ballpark. How often does that kind of thing happen? Is it common? Are people getting better at that?
Oh, look, I mean, it is like the more experienced publishers, I think, tend to have a better estimate from the get-go for sure. Sometimes you get like a first-time publisher that is really looking to do it cheap. You know, there are people that are, you know, that are almost acknowledging that, okay, I'm kind of looking to do this pretty cheap, you know. Basically, if you're in a position where any amount of money more than zero is going to be expensive, you know, like, and there are people that are in that space, so they just don't really want to spend money on it. That's it's very difficult to do much with that, that budget. It's people that generally most people are pretty good these days. I mean, I've had discussions with, you know, artists about the prices that we set for art, and, you know, from an artist's point of view, you know, we are all still sort of, you know, working constantly to sort of like try and calibrate our prices and make sure that we're not undercharging, especially because, you know, it's a tricky kind of business to work out exactly. You know, you obviously got to set a price that's based on making a living wage, right, at the minimum if you can, and yet it's also a kind of supply and demand sort of equation, right, where publishers may only have a certain amount per piece to pay, and if that works out there, then you take that. So there's lots of sort of being an art director, you know, you sort of see the publisher's side, you see the artist side, and you see this kind of like ecosystem, you know, swirling around. And it's also tricky for artists as well, because, you know, designers work completely differently from artists generally. You know, designers work in their own time, design a game generally, and then get royalties for it. So the success of the product is hinged to the designer, right? So you have a really big success, you're going to get some success, and if the game isn't successful, well, you don't get as much. Whereas with an artist, you know, it's not necessarily hinged to the success. You know, the royalties aren't normally, you know, some artists will get royalties, but most artists don't get royalties. They get paid a flat fee. So what that does is it kind of motivates publishers to kind of want to charge less, because if they don't know the product's going to be a success, are they going to pull that money into it and take that risk? So art's a kind of a bigger risk than design in a weird way. And so, you know, whether or not, you know, there's ways for that to evolve and artists to be sort of more connected to the success of the product, and that can kind of find some sort of balance. But generally, it's just, you know, publishers have to sort of have a belief and a faith that the money they're going to spend on art is going to come back and, you know, repay them basically with their product. But in an industry where it is like every product that's put out there's a certain amount of gambling to it. You know, I mean, our philosophy is definitely make that as good as it can be, because if you don't, well, you're definitely not going to have much of a chance, right? So, so to get back to your question as to whether or not, you know, what the tips would be around that, I think you've just got to go into it understanding that there's different variables that you're going to have to sort of tweak and define that right balance. And yeah, I mean, you know, get help where you can, I guess, if you're unsure.
We have a question just come in from Lee. Hi, Lee. Lee is someone who I've gotten to meet in Sydney and is a really cool game. So I recommend people check out Lee. And Grimwald is the game. Just putting it out there. It's a very cool, heavy game. So Lee has asked, how often does the art direction influence the game design itself in your experience?
Well, it doesn't. In a lot of games, it doesn't, because obviously the game's designed beforehand a lot of times. But there have been, again, this is sort of like where everything fits in the process and who's taking what role, because I've been in positions like with Everdell where that game came in with a different theme, and I put on the art director hat, spoke with James, the designer, and we came up with, okay, let's do this as the woodland creature theme, and then that totally influenced the game design, because then we're going through all the cards and we're like, oh, this guy's this sort of person, and okay, give him this power, and we tweak the game up with the art direction and the visual thoughts in mind. Even down to like we designed the board from an art direction point of view of wanting it to look pretty and organic, and then that kind of influenced the expansions, right? Because then we're like, oh, now we're going to attach this board on the side like a jigsaw puzzle, and we're going to put this other thing over here.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, and that's what we try and do at Quillsilver, is we like that holistic approach where we're able to sort of think about art direction and these sorts of things earlier in the mix. I think that's sort of the ideal, and I think some like to bring up Magic the Gathering again, that's something where you have that feedback, right? It's like they term it like top down or bottom up kind of design, where top down sort of coming from the theme, and you've got this idea of this world, and then that leads you to create a certain sort of game design based on the world. Bottom up is you've got some mechanics, and then you sort of build some sort of world vision on top of that. And generally in board games, it tends to be a little bit more bottom up. Generally, like obviously the designer is kind of working with ideas of their theme, but maybe they're not thinking about the art direction, and so things kind of get layered on top as they go and it's built up. Generally, it's bottom up, but I think there's definitely occasions where you get that top down sort of approach, or at least there's sort of like a mix, where ideas for the art and so forth are impacting the game design. So Everdell was definitely one where that happened. Trying to think if there's other ones.
So Lee's asked a follow-up. Lee's asked a follow-up question or made a comment, which is that it seems like a good art director might almost need to be a good game developer as well. And I know that that's something that obviously with Quillsilver you do both functions, like you do game development and art direction. Do you see them as sort of cross, affecting each other, cross-pollinating each other, or are they usually fairly distinct?
Yeah, they do. I think that's what I'm saying. In who knows what the actual title of it is, like in board games, it's something. I've tried to call it product designer at time, give it creative direction or something, like different things. But yeah, because it can span into the thematic sort of direction, and it can also go into the game development side of things as well. So it's definitely a broad category because it all does interconnect, and where you kind of get the edge is kind of where the things blend. I think generally that's where it sort of lets you do fun things. If you can have the art really resonate with the gameplay or influence the gameplay in some way, you get these really nice kind of interconnected products. So I think for sure, it definitely helps to have game development in the mix. Can influence it for sure.
Sorry, I just had to have a then unexpected cough. So what I might do, we're coming. We've been talking for a bit, and I'm just looking at the clock, and I'm just mindful of not having us have another hour and a half episode like we've had in the past. So, Kate and Alana, can you think about maybe one more question that you want to ask Dan, and I'll ask one now, and then we'll go through either of you, and then we can move on to some other stuff in the episode. So, Dan, maybe to flip the roles here, when you're hired as an artist, what do you find is useful for people to give you as art direction? Like, what's something you like to hear from an art director or from someone doing art direction?
I mean, I like to have a discussion with them for sure. So I like there to be a back and forth. I think most artists enjoy that. I think every artist is different. So some artists will just want a straight up brief, 100%, and others will want to kind of have a discussion about it and dream it up. I enjoy, a discussion and thinking it through. I do like sort of trying to get a sense, I guess, of their tastes and what's going to excite them. Definitely it really helps if you can get some emotional kind of response from an art director. Like you can really get a sense of, this is what they really like. This is what's making them happy. So get some kind of like back and forth of an emotional sort of reinforcement is really nice. So that you can kind of work with that and keep honing in on that and improving that. And yeah, I think, like to the last question, the projects where we're able to talk about the game itself and talk about what the game needs, what does this do in the game? Like, why is this relevant in the game? I'm not just creating a piece of art, but what's the feeling of this component, for players when they have it? Like, why am I creating this piece of art? Really get into the mechanics of it, I think is really useful. Yep. So I like people being able to talk to those points rather than just a broad sort of, I want it to kind of look like, whatever. To get into the details of why.
All right, Kate, do you have one last question for Dan?
I've been sitting here thinking about it, and I always find it interesting to find out about the path or the road not taken. So looking at projects you've done, pick your favourite child, which shouldn't have one, but everybody does. Something that you wish you had done on that project that you didn't, and how you'd go about doing that, with the benefit of all the hindsight.
From an art direction point of view, I guess would be the best way to think about it, because I'm sure there's other aspects to things. Well, I mean, there's definitely things that have come up that I'm less happy with. Not necessarily like choices I've made, but just sort of limitations with projects like that.
Because it never quite got there, or you sort of went, I wish I hadn't taken that direction with it.
Very, very, very few. Like I wish I hadn't taken that entire direction. I tend to have to feel pretty good at the direction to be able to do it. That's kind of the whole. That's the work. Most of the work is I need to feel like the direction's good. I feel like that's kind of my main thing that I can do as an art director. I mean, there's definitely times when games come back and I'm like, the artist just didn't deliver what I was hoping they would deliver. And I pushed and I'm like, can we try this? Can we try that? And they never quite get there, but that can happen. And that they're very hard. You can't really sort of look at those projects as like, that was, I wish I'd done something differently. Sometimes it's just.
I wasn't even thinking about a hugely different vision, but just a slight tweak, just to change this thing that you'd go, now that would make it perfect. Those sorts of.
Yeah, not really. I think it's because part of the process is getting to that point where you're okay with it.
Is finding that point.
Get to that point where it's like, there are little things that this is where we get to, because there's always like trade-offs. That's something people don't really understand, even when it comes to time and stuff. So as an artist, you kind of learn that this is the amount of time we had to finish this thing, and we did the absolute best we could in that time period, and then we drew a line under it. And like I am a perfectionist to some degree, but I'm not a perfectionist about things that are past. I'm a perfectionist about things that I'm working on now.
That's probably a healthy mindset.
Well, it does drive you to do better stuff, but you don't dwell on it.
Alana, question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, do you need to be an artist or a good artist to be a good art director?
I mean, I would say that you probably do, but I don't know that for sure because there may be good art directors that aren't.
Because you're a good artist.
Yeah, I'm okay. You know, like I think I understand enough about it to be able to kind of see how a piece of art's working and why it is or why it isn't, and you know, to be able to maybe understand the limitations of, you know, like if we were to change this thing or if we were to do this thing, you know, like this would be a huge overhaul, or, you know, like to sort of understand it from the artist's perspective as to where they're sort of at. And, you know, so I think that definitely helps to be able to at least kind of get the best results possible within the timeline and within the budget and stuff like that, or at least give you the best chance of doing that. And definitely, I feel like definitely finding artists is a kind of you probably need to be a good artist to some degree. It's sort of a weird, especially with the way I like to work, whereas I like to sort of do things that are fun and innovative and sort of haven't been done much. So, you know, for example, like with Andy, I told this story before, like with Everdell, where, you know, I hadn't seen him do any of that anthropomorphic sort of art. I basically found a website or a picture somewhere, and it was just like this picture of a statue of an angel in like a forest setting with this sort of atmosphere around it. And I saw that and I thought, oh, this is the person that did this, I can tell, has got a certain kind of cuteness to their line sort of paint work, and there's a sort of clarity to it, and I could just kind of tell that he'd probably be able to do the critters and do them justice. And then I met him in person and he sort of had this quality to him, and I just sort of felt like he was the right person to do it. So I think that kind of takes like an intuitive sort of art sense. Whereas now it's like everyone knows do that, right? So you can just go, oh, Andy does that.
Yeah, do the thing you've already done again.
Yeah. If you're trying to sort of, you know, be cutting edge, you're trying to, you know, you just enjoy that, doing something new and surprising people, you know, which is kind of like why I do board games in general, is because I enjoy being creative and dreaming up new stuff. So to do that, I think it does help to have, you know, the artistic background to kind of help identify those new possibilities, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we might wrap up the main interview and move on to our special questionnaire for this week. So thank you very much, Dan, for that information. And I'm sure it was very helpful to a lot of people. I know I learned some stuff. If people want to talk to you more about it later on or leave comments in our videos, then please do, and we'll try and get to them and pass them on to Dan. So we're going to do our world-famous Materialise questionnaire. And this one is a modified questionnaire because you've done our classic OG questionnaire before. So we are going to go into some new questions, and I'll just get rid of this title screen because I don't know why that's still up there. Okay, so the first question, Dan, is what color do you prefer to be when playing a game?
Normally red, or if red's unavailable, maybe black. So sort of fiery, kind of stand out, or kind of, you know, cool.
What's with the red? Everyone wants red.
It's the best color.
Oh, jeez. I mean, to be fair, I'm wearing red glasses.
You know, a lot of game boards tend to be neutral, greeny, or, you know, like very game red. So the red tends to sort of pop, which kind of helps.
Find your pieces more easily.
Yeah.
So I like playing yellow, and that's partly for the same reason. That one of the reasons I started playing yellow a lot was so I could find where I was on the board or a table easily. And then I've just grown to really love it. But I have some games I have a different tactic. So years ago, like one of the first games that I played a lot of was Risk, like normal classic Risk, and I preferred playing black or grey because I had an unfounded theory that those pieces blended into the board more, and so if you had a big army of like 100 pieces, it only looked like 20, and so it was psychological warfare that I was playing with people not realizing how big my armies were. I have no idea if there's any basis in this, like, you know, if that's an actual thing or if it's just all in my head, but I would usually try and play one of those colors that would blend into the board more than stand out. So anyway, I don't know.
It sounds like, some of your art direction could be channeled into choosing appropriate colors for
For the
your
player colors,
players.
Totally. The big part of it, color scheme and so forth.
Yeah, and that's also, I mean, we might as well just talk about that for a second, but I've seen some games where player colors are very similar to the like rest of the art or like the background art or whatever, and that can be, so obviously it can be harmonious and that can be a positive, but from a UI, like user interface thing, it can be difficult because then it's like, oh, is that a player like zone or piece or thing, or is that a just a regular, you know? And so
supposed to blend with this because it belongs there.
Yeah, like, and so sometimes you actually want the player colors to be quite distinct, or in my opinion, quite distinct from the rest. Anyway, that's just a little thing.
Yeah, I sort of tend to try and like color code entire games. You know, I'll sort of, one of the early things I'll do as an art director is I'll think about the color space and certain color. You know, I may like isolate a single color that's used for a very specific thing, and all the other colors are quite separate from it. You know, you might have a group of resources that all sort of are in a certain pastel space, and then these are more saturated. You kind of find ways to sort of break up the color schemes so that there's meaning there.
Cool. All right, question number 2. What is a game that you personally enjoy to play that uses meeples?
Okay. Well, I still enjoy Carcassonne, so that's
classic.
That's classic. And I do enjoy Everdell. Don't really play it much these days because I've played it a million times. But
so you played a lot of it, yeah.
You know, that was fun. I designed the meeples for that, and that was kind of a fun part of that product. So,
for people that don't know, the meeples in Everdell are different, like these anthropomorphic animals, and so they're not standard meeples. They're really beautiful custom ones. So yeah. Awesome. All right. So question number 3. What is a game that you like to teach people?
Well, I don't enjoy teaching people really long games, that's for sure. I do kind of find myself failing at that, I guess, doing it really well. So definitely smaller games that kind of have one little fun little quirky thing to it. The one that comes to mind is just an old game called For Sale. You guys have played that one?
No, I haven't.
No.
Classic game, For Sale. So it's just a very simple auction sort of game where you're buying these houses for certain amounts of money, and then once you've got them, you're selling the houses for this thing. It's just a very simple sort of thing, but it's got a nice little kind of hook in it. Any game that's sort of like first time or very casual players can learn and sort of get that little extra thing to it. You know, this isn't just like a lucky game, you know, it's better than Uno sort of thing. Any game that's like that, it's sort of pretty simple, but got that hobby kind of hook to it.
Cool. All right, question number 4. What's a game from your childhood that you'd be happy to play now?
Not a lot of the board games, probably. Like when I was really little, I think most of the board games I've got memories of, I couldn't even really remember what the rules were. I don't know if I ever fully learnt them properly. I had this little crazy train thing, and it looked really fun. I thought it was cool, but I can't remember ever actually playing it properly. Probably like role-playing games, the things that I played, you know, early D&D stuff. My friend and I actually made up told this story before too. His older brother or dad or someone had D&D, but he played it with him, and then he came back to school and he was telling us about it, and we couldn't like work out what it was, and we didn't have the books or anything, so we sort of like just homebrewed this sort of weird version of D&D.
Cool.
That's awesome.
And it was just sort of this strange, had like just all these weird characters in it, and it was basically just based all around like Greek myth. So all the monsters were Medusas and stuff. And yeah, that would be fun to find that little book or whatever we made that up in again.
That could be your next Quillsilver, hit. Bring it back.
People are looking for those sort of quick sort of role playing games nowadays. So very light.
Awesome. All right. So the final question number 5: which non-living artist do you wish you could work with on a tabletop game?
Okay. Well,
That's not the same question as number 5 was last week, is it?
It's a better question than the one from last week.
Right.
In my opinion.
there was an artist, there was a D&D artist, so it was the big 4 D&D artists when I was into that in my teens was, I'm going to try and remember him, Jeff Easley, Clyde Caldwell, Larry Elmore, and Keith Parkinson. I used to collect these like collector cards, like trading card sort of things of the different artists. And Keith Parkinson had a set of those, and his stuff was like my favorite stuff, and this real sort of sense of light to it and realism. And I think he died around that time, like probably when I was about 20 or something like that. He was a really, really good artist. He died pretty young. I think he would be really good in board games. He would have added something really amazing to board games. So probably Keith Parkinson, I would say.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. So that thus ends the questionnaire for today and the main interview. So thank you, Dan. We are now before we do the end of the episode though, we're going to talk about our Kickstarter for a little bit, just to talk about some of the work that's been done and things. So what I might do is I might actually bring Kate up as the main person. And well, you've got all the lovely samples there. So and this is Kate and Alana have both worked on this a lot more, and Dan, you've done a lot of work on it because you've been doing the art direction and coordination with the artists. So Kate, do you want to just tell us a bit about what these artworks are and what's going on?
Well, I mean, Dan could tell you better than I can what the artworks are, because honestly, he's done a lot more work on this stuff than any of us have. Obviously, we do production stuff, but Dan is responsible for organising the lovely.
Well, let's do that then. Dan, do you want to just give us a quick thing, or do you want to? No, you want to tell us about the Kickstarter first, and then we'll do the.
All right. Well, it's really simple. May 30, we're kickstarting. Well, we're not kickstarting it. We're using Kickstarter as a way to draw awareness to the fact that we have this product that we're launching called Stellar Prints, which is high quality UV printing on steel that attaches the wall with a magnet. And I'd show you, except that I took my magnets down so I could paint the wall, and I haven't put them back up. So just pretend that there's a magnet there and I'm going on it. Or go and watch the video of me and Tom Vassell going on a wall with Andrew Bosley. Not actually Andrew Bosley. Andrew Bosley.
His work, his artwork.
Just hold still, Andrew.
Yeah, just like sticking people onto the wall. That's the new thing.
It's like we used to use Velcro. You put on big Velcro, so you're a magnet.
Yeah, magnets. Oh boy.
So it attaches the wall with magnet. We give a sleeve for everything so that you can take them off the wall easily. No, don't put that there, Kate. I was going to stack one print on top of another, which is a big no-no because they scratch if you put something rough on them. So everything comes with a sleeve so that you can put it away and store it safely and take something else out and put that on the wall instead. You can do... So
part of the I guess the features of these prints is that they're easily to swap, like because they are the magnet.
Very easy to swap.
So you can have a little library that you can just swap around and change your space up.
And they're very forgiving as well, because you know when you hang a painting or something on the wall, it's got the string. If you don't put it in exactly the right spot, it ends up like this on the wall, and you just the prints go up and they just stay however you put them. So you can have it off center on the magnet, or you can have it very high on the magnet or very low on the magnet, and it doesn't go, I'm going to fall off the wall or I'm going to hang crookedly, unless of course you want it to do that. So
well, I know
you're
one
on your
of
own.
One of the tests. I know one of the tests that was done was created by Joel, with the division of the larger artwork into four, smaller bits. So.
We were lucky that when Joel commissioned the cover for Unfair, he asked the Cuddingtons to do it at 900 DPI, which is huge. But yes, that's a very big PSD on our hard drive. But it meant that we could go, well, what would it look like if we took something and we chopped it into multiple plates and set them up? So we've got a 2x2 upstairs in the back room, and it looks great. We've got enough pixels there. We could do a 3x3 if we felt so inclined. So that works beautifully. You could, if you wanted to have a square one, you could turn it and display it as a diamond. So that's actually something I need to document so that I can say to publishers, hey, go crazy. Diamonds. I actually want to see, I haven't mentioned this to Nick yet, so if Nick's watching, sorry, I haven't mentioned this to you. I want to see if we can do hexagonal ones so that you could, tessellate hexes all over your wall. Because
I wonder what the fabrication for it, because like currently they were just doing the right angles, but hexes.
That's fine. It's just a bit that
degree?
goes whoop and folds
Or
it
is
over.
60 degree.
60 degrees.
60 degrees.
It's just slightly different.
Slightly different die.
Yeah. So I think that could be great, but I haven't spoken to Nick about that yet.
So for those who don't know, so we're doing the Kickstarter, which we've got these sets of artworks, and we've talked about the artist a little bit there. But this is all part of a larger project, which is the Stella, Stella Store
Prints.
and Stella Prints. And post Kickstarter, this is a place where publishers and game artists can have their work for sale.
List their artwork for sale, printed on demand
these metal prints,
on these metal plates. So we're starting with metal plates. It's all print on demand. We don't print something unless somebody says, I want a copy of that. So there's no warehousing for publishers unless they say, look, I want 100 copies of that, and I'll just sell it through my web store one bit at a time, which is absolutely a choice. We're in the middle of organising with some publishers now to get copies of some of their things to Gen Con so that they can sell them at Gen Con, which is pretty cool. I can't tell you who they are. But
so we have the Stella Print store website up on the screen, which is STELLARPRINTS.store STORE. Now I can't recall. Is the website live for people?
Yep. We got it live the day before we left to go to Gamma.
Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
And so are there already? This again, I should know this. I work for your company. Like, gosh, this is terrible.
I think we've got about 70 pieces up there at the moment.
Oh wow! I did not realize there was that many. That's awesome.
So a lot from Rule and Make, a few bits from Joel for Funfair and Unfair. We've got several from Jackie Davis from her Soul project.
I don't know what that is, but I'll look it up later.
She illustrated a book and kickstarted it last year, I think, and it's an art heavy book. It's heavily illustrated story with beautiful stuff. And she has, my favorite of her pieces is there's a hand viewed from this sort of angle, there, and it's got like flames and glowing things on it. And her light, her ability to light a thing is just. It's really, really good.
It speaks to you, obviously. It seems to be.
It really speaks to me. So the gumshoe one there that I was waving just before with the trench coat, in her series of games, my favourite series of prints for Stella is it's not that one. It's the solo gamer, the Wild West lady sitting on the slain bot.
So if you go to launchtabletop.com/KS, that'll take you to our Kickstarter pre-launch page, and you can see, I'm pretty certain you can already see some of the samples of these artworks.
There are little slivers in the preview image. And we've put up some little bits from our trip to Gamma, and you can see bits and pieces up there. So
awesome.
Yes.
So so if anyone's interested, both if you're interested for your own walls, but what we're probably, especially in terms of this podcast audience and who we're trying to reach, is we're looking for publishers and artists who want to join Stella. Like we think that more the merrier. And so if you are interested, then how could someone express interest or talk to you, get some information?
Email Stella with an R, STLLAR at launchtabletop.com. And if I'd planned ahead, I would have had a little banner to put up.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I just was looking at the list there, and I realised I didn't have that prepared either. We've got a different email address, but not that one.
Yep.
Oh, Alana's, I think, might be on it right now.
Yep. Lightning fingers. Yes,
Fantastic.
Email us and say, these look really interested. These look really interesting. I am interested.
Yep.
How do I? There's a bit of a conversation because there are a few conditions around it. The game has to have been published, or it has to have either been kickstarted or in a Kickstarter campaign
Yes.
currently, or crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're on GameFound. We're not doing it.
No,
Or it's
we
got to
are.
be in production.
We're fine with it. We're not biased.
So it's not intended to be people going, I made this game to play with my mum. It needs to be a
more widely publicly available. Yeah.
hobby game that's been released for sale.
Yeah.
So,
So while we got Dan here, you need to ask him about his role with all this art.
What was your role with the Kickstarter artwork, Dan?
Yeah, so when we started talking, we talked about all the cool things we could do with the prints and all, these different games that we're going to be able to get the covers and do all that sort of stuff. And we thought, well, we really sort of want to launch the product in a way where we're able to sort of do something that sort of celebrates it a bit and kicks things off. So we all put our heads together and dreamt up this idea of, well, instead of using existing art, why don't we commission some artists to create some original art that celebrates the hobby? So we reached out to Andy Bosley, Jackie Davis, and Miguel Coimbra, and we presented them with some ideas for triptychs that have a sort of a theme that could have, basically you could have it up on your gaming wall. It's not a specific game, it's just about sort of celebrating the hobby. So with Andy's, it was a journey through gaming, which starts with like a little kid in a fantasy land with dice and marbles and little snakes and ladders and
there's the dude here from Fireball Island, and there's the pawns from chess,
Easter eggs and stuff.
That's cool.
Transferred into sort of the early kind of gateway Euro games and so forth, like Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride, and your first encounter.
Catan.
Catan. The Easter egg I like in this one the most is the farmer lying down in the field, which is like a Carcassonne reference.
That's great.
I hadn't noticed that. Next time I look at that one, I'll go and check that out.
And then through to
how many Easter eggs did you hide throughout all of them? And are we going to do some reveals during the campaign of there are 6 Easter eggs in this piece? Can you find them all?
There's a few. There's a couple in each, but how much of them are an Easter egg and how much of them are just sort of standing.
An homage.
Yeah. So that was Andy's, and the third one is like more kind of advanced games, inspired by Civilization games and size.
Is this one of the Easter eggs in Jackie's?
Sorry.
So hold it. Is the bit that I'm pointing
to? Jackie's.
Yeah, I was wondering.
With Jackie, we've actually hidden in this wall of whatever, crazy
clues.
Wall of clues. Yeah, we've hidden a lot of her different games. So that she's worked on as an artist. So if you go through, you can find different little references to games that she's worked on.
Could you hold it up again, Kate?
So you may be able to see a few things.
So that's the super obvious one, but then there's another one which is more recent.
Quite a few.
And so we won't point to any more out because we want to have people discover it themselves.
Let people discover some secrets.
Jackie's series was gamer types, so she's created different characters that are sort of like archetypes of the types of people that play games. So that's one we've called the gumshoe gamer. So it's someone that's into puzzling it all out and working on the strategy and being one step ahead. Then we've got another one that I don't know if it's been printed yet, called the Omni Gamer, which is someone that loves to play all sorts of different games. And then we've got the Lone Gamer, who's like a Wild West cowgirl that's defeated an AI kind of robot.
Gunslinger. She's defeated the bot. I love that one of hers. That's my favorite.
And then Miguel's was gaming groups. So he created 3 pieces that were themed around fantasy, space, sci-fi, and horror.
Yeah.
So they were just like different, celebrating sort of the different kind of quirky gaming groups.
One thing I only learnt in the last couple of days about that triptych, his one, is that he's got this arc or oval kind of shape that's going
Yeah, the
across the
curve.
three artworks, but it's not. Yeah, and it makes it. It's such a clever way to connect the pieces together. Like yeah. So go to the Kickstarter page and check it out. I recommend because I know I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like I love it. All right. Well, we've talked about this a lot, so we might move on and just finish up on the episode, close the episode down or out. What's the right words? I don't know how to language anymore.
Say farewell.
Yeah, say farewell. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan, so much for your time and sharing your experiences with us and knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Really appreciated.
And next week, Dan helped us organise next week.
Yes, actually, it's a good point. Let's bring that up. So next week we have booked in Andrew Bosley. So
Exciting.
it is. It's wonderful. And so it's going to be a different time. Well, I mean, we don't really have a regular time, do we? So anyone who follows the show is already a bit used to that. But the it's going to be on 4 p.m.
It'll be
Eastern
hour.
No,
it's 9 a.m.
No, that's
Friday
our time, but
us.
it's 4 p.m. Is he East or what time zone is he in?
Is he Central?
Oh, I'm not sure. One of the US time zones.
Yeah, it's.
We need someone who's more knowledgeable than us who organised it to
time zones are hard.
It does get difficult. I thought he was on the Eastern time zone, the EST for some reason.
Is he Colorado?
It's mountain. That's mountain time.
That's mountain time.
Oh, so that's central. That might be central then, or.
Well, it's mountain time.
No, mountain time is
mountain time.
Closer to us than central.
Oh, so there's another one again. I don't understand all this.
They have
mountain time is mountain time.
Yeah.
That just makes me think it's like a made-up time. That it's just like, oh, it's whatever happens. It's mountain time.
What happens in mountain time stays
yes.
in mountain time.
Okay, so I'll be putting up the details about that thing probably tomorrow, I think, if not the latest on Monday. So anyone who is keen to hear some of Andrew's story and experiences, we're planning on just asking him, his journey through being a board game artist is, and thanks to Dan for helping to connect us and make that possible. So, really exciting.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Kate and Alana, for being the best co-host anyone could ask for. And then, when Alan's on, I'll call him the best one as well. So you're all bests. But thank you very much for, as usual, for being here. It's wonderful. And thank you to everyone that joined us by watching the episode, and to Lee for putting comments in. Much appreciated. Materialise is produced by Launch Tabletop. If you visit launchtabletop.com, you can find out more about Launch Lab. And I might just bring up launchtabletop.com. And Launch Lab is our print-on-demand board game manufacturing service or platform. It's free to sign up, and you can check out all the features and put together projects. And then if you decide to order something, if you use the code Materialise, that's Materialise at the checkout, you'll get 20% off your next order. That's pre-shipping, not including shipping. You can also join us on Discord, and where's the button for Discord? Oh, I've lost it. There it is.
That one?
Thank you. Yep, you found it. Thank you. So we've also got a Discord. If you head to launchtabletop.com/Discord, you can then join our Discord. And we are also on YouTube and Facebook, so feel free to find us there. And I'm Eris, and I've been your host. And thank you again to everybody. And I'll play the closing video now. So goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.